up, you guys? Welcome back to the Petal and Pivot Podcast. I'm your host, Jordan, and I'm so happy to be here today. I think I'm finally, I don't want to jinx it, but I think I'm finally getting into a better routine with school. This first month was just brutal. We've already had 2 exams, so it's just been crazy trying to adjust and everything, but slowly but surely, we're getting there. I don't promise to be super consistent, but I do promise to do my best, and that's all I can do. Today's episode I'm really excited for because it really feels like a core Petal and Pivot episode because I'm like breaking down the science and then also giving realistic advice that you can apply. It's also kind of ironic because if you haven't looked at the title, we're talking about sleep today, and if you've listened to any of my episodes in the past, you've probably heard me complain about my sleep schedule because it's just really bad. I'm doing the best that I can with the tools that I have, but it's rough out here. I know that sleep is important. I studied psychology and neuroscience in undergrad, and I'm currently in medical school, so I definitely know that sleep is important, but I also know that it's something that we all neglect or don't prioritize as much just with the busy modern life that we live. So I wanted to just share a bit about that with you today. But before we get into that, we gotta catch up. We gotta chit chat because what else is the podcast for? I have just been super busy, super locked in with school. It's definitely been an adjustment. It's been a little bit hard on my mental health, just being so busy all the time and not really having time to take care of myself as much as I would like. And then also I am currently in rehab for a knee injury, so I haven't been able to lift weights and strength train as much as I would like. And so that's definitely taken a toll as well. But it is what it is. I'm currently reading The Wedding People. I don't know if I talked about that before, but it's a literary fiction book, and I would give it like a 2 to 3 stars. It's not my favorite book, but I'm kind of determined to see how it ends. So I'll probably talk about that more in the next episode. And then the following book that I'm going to read is The Missing Half by Ashley Flowers. I love Crime Junkie, and I enjoyed her first book, All Good People Here, so I'm excited to read the second one. I'm also starting a book club at my school, and I think we have our pick for September, so that's what I'll read after The Missing Half. So lots of reading going on. I'm currently watching Forever on Netflix. It's interesting so far. I think I'm on episode 3 or 4 out of 8, maybe. It's just like the story of 2 Black high schoolers in California falling in love. So it's just kind of wholesome. And what else have I been consuming? I've been trying to get back into YouTube, getting back to my favorite YouTubers. I've also been watching Total Drama Island in French. I think I've talked about it before, but watching children's shows in a different language is one of my favorite ways to learn languages, quote unquote, passively. And Total Drama Island on Netflix has so many different languages, so I've watched it in English, Spanish, and French at this point. I think that's all the updates that I really have, so I'm gonna get into the intro segments. This is season 1, episode 23, The Science of Sleep, and the quote for today is, "My mind, body, and soul are worthy of rest." I chose this quote because I feel like sometimes we can see rest as unimportant or prioritize other things above it, but your body is the only home that you have, and so we need to take care of it. And your mind directly impacts how other parts of your life are able to function. So I definitely think we need to see the value of rest and know that we're worthy of taking care of ourselves. My pedal moment is that I am making friends in medical school, and I really love the girls that I've met so far. We just really are supportive of each other, and I know that medical school can be cutthroat sometimes. People can be very selfish and mean, but I haven't experienced that with the group of girls that I've connected with. My pivot moment would be that my mental health is just needing some attention right now, and I do think that sleep is part of that, but my therapist is my girl, so we're gonna sort it out. Getting into the prompts from last episode. 1, how would your friends describe you? I think that my friends would describe me as caring, determined, and strong, I think. A lot of the friends that I've had them for years, so they've seen me in all different phases of life, I would say. So they've seen me come through some of the hardest things. And I think they would also say that I'm caring, because I do have a lot of long distance friendships, and long distance friendships are harder to maintain than in-person friendships, obviously, and we all are very busy. A lot of my friends work in healthcare, so our schedules often don't align, or just the distance again can make things difficult. What hobbies do you have? I've talked about my hobbies so many times on this podcast. I have a whole episode about it, but some of my favorite hobbies would be reading, working out, cooking, and watching TV, I think. And the last prompt was, when are you the most productive? I am actually a night owl. I've found I can be very productive between the hours of like 6 and 10 p.m. But I can also be very productive between the hours of like 2 and 4. But I find that earlier in the day, I'm not super productive. So I typically structure my schedule so that I can sleep in a little bit more, because that's just what works best for me. Like if I was to go to live lectures for my school, they start at 8 a.m. And that simply does not work for me. That does not work for me. That does not work for my circadian rhythm. So it's better for me to just watch the recordings on my own time, because I'm going to pay attention more anyway. That's all the prompts from last time. So let's get into the main part of today's episode. The first thing that I wanted to talk about is, why is sleep so important? Everyone says like, oh, you need 8 hours of sleep. Sleep is important, blah, 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 blah. But a lot of times they forget to break down why it's actually important. So according to the NIH, sleep helps to support healthy brain and physical health. A lack of sleep can increase your risk of chronic conditions such as diabetes, hypertension, etc. It allows your parasympathetic nervous system to be active. A lot of you may have heard of your fight or flight system and your rest and digest system. Those are your autonomic nervous system, so the part of your body that functions automatically. And those systems, this is like a very simplified way of explaining it, but those systems run in opposition. So if one's active, the other one is more inactive. Your fight or flight system is your sympathetic nervous system. So if that's active all the time, your body isn't having time to really use your nutrients and recover and all of that. So sleeping is one of the ways that your body is able to activate your parasympathetic nervous system, or your rest and digest system. Sleep is also very important for your hormone cycles. There are several hormones that are important to your everyday function, including like reproductive hormones such as estrogen and testosterone, or hormones for sleep such as melatonin, hormones for responsiveness such as dopamine and adrenaline, hormones for growth, all different things. There's so many different hormones, and I'm thinking about doing an episode about that one day, but I want to wait until I'm a little bit more educated so that I can provide more useful advice. Sleeping also controls how your body reacts to certain foods, and it allows your immune system to function more. Think about it this way. Your body has those two systems that I talked about, the sympathetic, which is stress, and then the parasympathetic, which is restfulness. Back in our caveman days, if you are being chased by a bear, for example, your sympathetic nervous system is more activated. Your body is not going to prioritize fighting off an illness, because if you don't make it from running away from the bear, you're not going to survive for long enough for that illness to even have an impact. So those two systems, that's how you think about it. That's like a really easy way to visualize how those systems work, and it helps me to remember what systems will be functioning in that situation and what systems won't. Another article that I read from the Sleep Foundation shared 5 things that you can do to get better sleep. And I really liked each of these tips, because they're things that you can improve without having to spend a bunch of money, and they're not gonna be very time consuming for you to implement. The first one is sunlight. Getting sunlight exposure helps to regulate your internal body clock, because one of the important hormones for sleep is melatonin, and the production of melatonin is actually impacted by light. So if you expose yourself to sunlight when you wake up, your body's melatonin production will decrease, and that would allow you to feel more awake. The second thing is movement. Movement initiates body temperature changes and energy usage, and the more energy you use, obviously you're going to get tired afterwards, and that can help to impact your sleep functioning. Decreasing the temperature. So studies have found that sleeping in a colder room limits sleep disturbances. For me, I know that I get really hot when I sleep. I also think it's partially because I sleep with a weighted blanket and I just love a lot of layers. But I always put my house temperature to 68 degrees at night. I have it at 72 during the day. I know that's not possible for everyone, but whatever ways that you can to decrease the temperature around you when you sleep. So for example, maybe you wear less layers of clothes or anything like that. The fourth tip is to relax before bed. This helps to ease the mind and prepare you for sleep. I am very particular about my night routines. I'm not gonna study in my bed and then close my laptop and try to go to sleep. That's just simply not gonna work. I have actually made it a habit to read every night before bed for the most part for at least 5 minutes, and that helps my brain to wind down and know that it's time for bed. The last tip that I got from the Sleep Foundation is to minimize light. As I spoke about before, melatonin is one of the hormones for sleep, and its production is impacted by light. If there is too much light that you're exposed to when it's time to go to sleep, then your body's not going to produce melatonin as well, and you're not going to be able to fall asleep properly. The next thing that I wanted to do in this episode, which is something that I love to do in my science-backed episodes, is to break down some sleep trends. I've done this with the nutrition episode, and I also did it with some of the mental health episodes that I did in the past. The first thing that I wanted to talk about is melatonin. Everyone is always talking about melatonin supplements and how they change their life and all of that. Information that I got from the Sleep Foundation shared that melatonin is a natural hormone produced by the body to initiate sleep, and melatonin supplements can reduce the amount of time that it takes to fall asleep, but it's not an essential part of your sleep routine. I think that last part is something that we really want to focus on, because your body is already producing melatonin, so you don't need to go out and spend money to get your body to have melatonin so that you can fall asleep. There are practices such as the last 5 suggestions that I gave that can allow you to get your body to produce more melatonin on its own without supplementing. I've also heard from different therapists and things that it's actually more effective to use melatonin only in certain situations, because if you give your body too much melatonin, then your body's going to stop producing as much melatonin naturally, and so it can be a little bit of a negative feedback loop. The second trend that I wanted to talk about is mouth tape. I feel like mouth taping really took off the past year or two on TikTok, and I find it interesting. I have tried mouth taping a couple of times, but I more so use it for, allegedly, I snore sometimes, so I have used mouth tape to help with that. And then also I've noticed that my throat can get dry sometimes, so I'll use mouth tape to help me to keep my mouth closed so that my throat doesn't feel as dry when I wake up in the morning. According to a study by Fangmeyer et al. In 2025, there isn't much research to show the benefits of mouth taping, but a preliminary literature review showed that it may improve obstructive sleep apnea, snoring, and ventilation. I don't think that mouth tape is as revolutionary as some influencers may make it seem. I would suggest that you talk to a licensed health professional before trying it, but if it's something that works for you, it's something that's relatively inexpensive, so if it works for you, it works. But I don't think it's as revolutionary as some people make it seem, and you don't need to buy the top name brands, because at the end of the day, they're all doing the exact same thing. The next trend that I wanted to talk about is a weighted blanket. Weighted blankets are one of my favorite things to do for sleep. I have one at my apartment. I have one at my parents' house. I have a weighted stuffed animal that I take with me when I travel, because that helps me to sleep as well. And I think that it's more helpful to me for the mental health benefits, but I love my weighted blanket, and I definitely recommend it to most people, but it doesn't work for everyone. According to an article from Harvard Health in 2025, weighted blankets should be around 10% of your body weight, and they've been used in healthcare for years. They are thought to mimic a hug or swaddling a baby. I want someone to invent an adult swaddle, because babies get swaddled up and they just look so comfortable, and I'm one of those people who wants my bed to be made perfectly before I get into it so I can feel like a little burrito when I get in it. And if someone invented an adult swaddle, they could have my money. I guarantee you that much. But weighted blankets are thought to mimic a hug or swaddling a baby, and it's mainly thought to help with anxiety or neurodiversity. However, there are not enough studies to back their effectiveness for improving sleep. A lot of people use it because, again, it feels like a hug, and a hug is one way to activate your parasympathetic nervous system. So I could see if that was how it was improving sleep. But as I just mentioned, there's not a ton of studies to back their effectiveness. So similar to the mouth tape, if it's something that works for you, that's great, but there might not be as much science to back it as some of the other suggestions that I made. The last trend that I wanted to talk about is the Hatch alarm clock. I feel like every time I go on social media, influencers are raving about their Hatch alarm clocks, and they can actually be really expensive. So I wanted to break down some of the research behind this product. You absolutely do not need a Hatch alarm clock. There are so many other options that you can go with. You can kind of make your own makeshift one, but some of the elements that it brings together are really helpful for sleep. For example, the white noise that it plays when you're falling asleep can help to quiet outside noises and to stimulate your brain, not stimulate, that's not the right word, signal to your brain to calm down. I don't know if I've talked about it before, but there is some research into like brain and behavior that shows the relationship between stimuli and responses. So if you're only listening to that music when it's time to go to sleep, it can help to remind your brain that, okay, I'm hearing this music, we're gonna go to sleep soon, and it can speed up that process. I think I talked about that in the habits episode, which I've talked about a lot. Oh, I talked about the hobbies episode earlier, not the habits episode, but I can link both of those in the show notes if that's something that's interesting to you. The second feature of the Hatch alarm clock that does have some science behind it is that it has a sunlight feature. So when it's time for the alarm to go off, it can start to change its lighting to mimic a sunrise, and that can help to stop the production of melatonin, which I've talked about a lot in this episode, and it can initiate some of those natural body rhythms. The last part of the Hatch alarm clock that I think can be useful is that it is a physical alarm clock. So you're not going to be scrolling on your phone before bed, and if you put your Hatch alarm clock further away from you, that's going to force you to get out of bed in the morning, and that's going to cause you to start to move and help you to wake up more. I base a lot of this information about the Hatch alarm clock from the article from the Sleep Foundation. What I have done to kind of mimic a Hatch alarm clock is that I just have a physical alarm clock in my room, so I have to get up to turn that off. And then I have Govee light bulbs that I use, and you can actually set those to mimic a sunrise at your desired wake up time. So that's a way that I have found for it to work for me. Oh, and then I just play white noise or whatever soundtrack on my TV when I'm going to bed on Spotify. So that's kind of how I've made my own Hatch alarm clock. I'm not spending the $300 on the actual thing, so I've just found methods that work best for me. That is everything that I have for the main part of today's episode. I hope that you learned something and that we will all be on track to get better sleep. The day that I improve my sleep schedule, I have been telling everyone, is when I'll be unstoppable. I promise you. It is definitely difficult for me as someone who is in medical school now, which can be very demanding, and is going into the healthcare field, which has the most ungodly hours known to man. I'm telling you, but that's a whole story for another day. But I just wanted to remind you all that sleep is definitely important, and I wanted to break down some of the science behind it because it can get very confusing, and when people start to use jargon terms, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. And this podcast is all about bringing science-backed information and implementing it into easy to apply ways in our life. But before you leave, you know I would never leave you without some journal prompts. The first one, what makes you feel calm? 2, what would you do if you had more energy in the day? And 3, what's keeping you from going to bed earlier? Thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Petal and Pivot Podcast. Please comment down below what time you usually go to bed. I typically go to bed between 1 a.m. and 2 a.m. I know that's horrible, but it's the truth and I would never lie to you guys. So comment down below what time you typically go to bed. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Petal and Pivot Podcast. Please like this episode, subscribe, follow, all of the things, and you can also check us out on social media where we have some content that's related to the podcast, but it's not just clips, I promise. And and I'll see you next time. Bye, guys.